Hey everyone, it's your girl Laura Williamson. This is Bear Fitness. I'm happy to have you here today. Today's show, well, wait, you should know who I am, right? I am a personal trainer, a Pilates instructor, and a health coach. And I have an exciting guest for you today. I have Katie Firth. She's with us today, and she's going to talk about imposter syndrome. Now, if you recall, we do these little chats, but also keep in mind that there's also a workout. So don't forget about that. So the workout is coming up later on. But for now, Katie's with us. I want to introduce you to her. Katie, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, okay, I'm excited. You know, I'm always excited. I can't help myself. So I didn't say this, but Katie is a leadership and life coach. All right. And so now we want to know all about you, all things Katie. Please tell us about yourself.
So I was born and raised Massachusetts. And I live in Boston still. I moved to Boston. I moved back into the city right after I finished undergrad, which was at Colby College in Maine. I was an econ math double major, so I'm definitely a data geek through and through. I also have
I didn't know that about you, by the way.
I didn't
interesting. I wouldn't take you as a data geek, but okay, but continue.
I love that.
I don't get geeked.
I was like, I'm sneak attack like that. So,
I think so.
Just when you think you know me, all of a sudden I take a corner, and hopefully in a good way.
Yeah,
so,
in a good way. A
little bit different.
Okay.
And I also have my master's in business administration from Boston University.
Okay.
So kind of adding that on my corporate side. And then I also a couple of years ago got certified as a professional coach.
Cool.
So that was kind of rounding out my education piece. And then I've spent 23 years in the financial services industry. And on my corporate life, I am still an executive in the financial services industry. But what I also added was also kind of my coaching practice and helping individuals just kind of, figure themselves out and find ways forward when they get stuck in their lives.
Yeah, it seems a lot of us get stuck sometimes. But you're doing a lot. So how did you get started with being a coach and helping people out? Like how'd that happen?
So it's a great question. In coaching school kind of education type of stuff, we always joke that coaches are born coaches, right? It's a hard wiring type of thing. I think that you genuinely want to help and support others and you want to encourage them. So I think I've always been that person. And then I've been managing people for almost 20 years. And, I think one of the things that's the most, beneficial or where I find the greatest value is kind of watching people just find the best versions of themselves, right? Find their way, figure out what that solution is, and just helping them through that journey, right? So I think for me, this was kind of how do I just take it to the next level more than anything else, because I've kind of been coaching, whether it be friends or through my job or anything like that, for most of my life.
So what motivates you? What motivated you to do this? Like I understood you when you said I had friends, things come up and I help them out, and I seem to always, and I consider myself a cheerleader of some sort, right? But I'm kind of hearing the same thing, but by the same token, we don't always go and say, well, I'm gonna certify myself or get certified as a coach so I can, like you said, take it the next step further. So for me, it just begs the question of what motivated you, what motivates you to do this and take it to that level, because it's a lot. You're working a full-time job and you're doing this. You're giving back. So why?
It's a great question. I think I had toyed for a while of going back to school. I'm a forever learner. So I just, whatever it is, whether it's a class or a certification or something like that, I'm always looking for what is that next thing that I can kind of learn and grow and, just kind of expand and figure out what else is out there, right? So I had started toying with the idea of maybe taking some classes in psychology or sociology because humans interest me. I love different kinds of humans, right? And I love what makes them tick and what makes them want to go and, what are the questions they ask themselves? How do they reflect? All of those kind of things, right? So all those deeper questions. And so I've been toying with that for a while and just never really kind of moved forward on it, right? And I don't exactly know why until probably I know why, which was I was probably waiting for this. So there was, so I unfortunately lost a friend in December of 2021, who was only 32 years old. And it hit me really hard. There had been several losses before her. And I think, this one just kind of, it just really, really hit hard. And I don't know if it was because of the compounding, but I suspect it was probably more of who she was.
Okay.
So she was a very, very special human. And, I think one of the things that she always valued and appreciated about me was my willingness to help and my ability to help. So as she would try to help somebody, if they couldn't figure it out, she'd be like, let's talk to Katie.
Okay.
And, I think when she passed, this became a way that I could honor her memory. She also was big in her community and, kind of helped a lot of people herself, right? So she had a big impact. And I think what hit me was when the world lost her, that impact was gone. And so I kind of felt like maybe this was a way that I could make up just even a small hair of kind of that impact that she had, and just by doing more.
Okay. So who's your typical client? Am I your typical client?
You would definitely be my typical client. And so, yes. So I always say I'm those smart, resilient, adaptable humans that get stuck. And it's the ones that, generally can find their way through most things, right? So it's that frustration that kicks in, or where you realize that you've lost your objectivity, right?
Okay.
Like you just need a sounding board. You just need someone to think through it in a systematic way. And what's neat about coaching is that it's not advising, it's not consulting. I'm not giving the answers. All I'm doing is asking questions in order to get to the answer that's already inside of you, right?
Okay.
So authenticity is one of my core values. It's something that I've always kind of gravitated towards in terms of being your true self and being in alignment with your true self, right? Because I feel that people operate best when they're in that environment, right? So with coaching, I get to lean into that. So I get to work with what's inside of the person and maybe reframe it, reshape it, ask a question, push it a little more. And that's really what it is. But I'm not giving answers. They are really ultimately on the hook for their own outcomes.
Okay. So for someone who's just checking in and seeing this, what is this imposter syndrome? What is it? What's the big deal? Why is it important? Is it even important?
So it's definitely important because it's one of those things that, kind of gets in your head, right? So so what it is essentially, it's that you're getting an award, a promotion, something that's recognizing you for greatness or an accomplishment. And your immediate, or maybe even, somewhat immediate reaction is, I'm not deserving of this. Did they get this wrong? I'm a fraud. They're going to figure this out. And you start kind of walking it back, and you start kind of thinking that there's luck involved or a misperception or something like that, and that it wasn't based on your ability, your merit, who you are. That is at its essence what imposter syndrome is. And it's a feeling. I think that's an important piece. I'm big on not identifying with feelings. I am, or I have. You're feeling it. It will, just like anything else, it will come and go. But I think it's just more of when you do have that feeling, it erodes the positivity that you could be extracting from that particular event, that recognition of the goodness or the talent that you're bringing.
But it would seem to me that if that's the case, based on your definition, this isn't something that only happens in say a professional or work environment. This could happen at pretty much any stage, or phase in life in general, if I'm hearing you correctly.
You're absolutely hearing it correctly. And it's, it definitely happens in professional settings, but it can happen in athletic performances. It can happen in parenting, especially, whether it's mothers or fathers or somebody feeling like they're not kind of living up to the best parenting that they could be or something, or that they're inferior to somebody else. And somebody's like, oh, you're the best mom. And you're like, oh my goodness, what are they saying? I wasn't at my child's game, and I wasn't this, and I wasn't that. And it's all those things.
Okay. Okay, so you and I, we've talked at length about this a few times now. And I mean, who cares? Like, why is this even important? Why even bring it up? What's this? I mean, honestly, I first heard the words imposter syndrome during, well, within the last 4 or 5 years. I want to say during COVID, during the pandemic, when we were all shut in and locked in, and the words were being thrown around quite a bit. But I mean, and I'm not trying to minimize, just to be clear. What's the big deal? Why is it important? Why bring it up? Why bring it up now?
So I think it's a focus because the amount of energy that goes into self-doubt,
Mm-hmm.
if you redeploy that
Mm-hmm.
toward your potential,
Mm-hmm.
amazing things could happen.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that you're holding back on really showing up fully and being able to do other more amazing things because you're trapped in yourself, kind of thinking that you're not good enough or you're not worthy or something like that. Whereas if you were to take that energy and put it towards something else, I feel like as a collective whole, we could be doing even more good, positive things, right? I think also it's also from a hand down perspective, right? Because I think there's others that will see you, and if you're questioning yourself, it might trigger them to question themselves. So this yuck feeling just kind of continues in perpetuity because it just gets handed off from person to person and generationally, to children and things like that. So I bring it up more from it's a very solvable thing.
Mm-hmm.
It takes work. It takes very, intense effort or intentional effort, I should say. But it is something that's solvable. And if you can get to the other side of it, great things can happen.
So it's easy for us to bring it up, but it just occurs to me as I'm talking to you. How do you even know that this is something that you might be experiencing? How can you tell? How do you know? Is there a way? Is there, I mean, because like you just said, like we all have our doubts, right? We have
Mm-hmm.
self-doubt. I mean, if you're human, you're going to have self-doubt every once in a while. Some
Right.
of us have it, it's situation based, and some of us, we carry it with us on a regular basis. But how are you going to know if you're experiencing imposter syndrome? And I'm being particular about the wording because I don't want to say suffering from. I just want
Mm-hmm.
to say experiencing because I believe it's something that will come and go depending on the task that you have to, or task you have to accomplish.
Yeah, it's a great observation. It does tend to be very task oriented. It won't necessarily be pervasive throughout your entire life,
Right.
which tends to be why it's harder to identify.
Okay.
I would say it's as soon as you can catch yourself by the words that you're thinking,
Okay.
right? So it's kind of, if you're getting an award, it's the I can't believe I got this,
Right.
but not because you're so excited,
Mm-hmm.
oh my goodness, I was up against, amazing other humans and whatever their talents were, right? So it was more of a recognition of the other people in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that. It's a I can't believe I got this as you're really questioning whether or not you should get it.
Okay.
And so you can catch yourself there if you're thinking I'm a fraud, right? Or somebody's going to figure out I'm not smart enough or something like that. Or,
Mm-hmm.
they'll realize at one point this kind of outward view that you recognize what you're thinking
Mm-hmm.
and how the world is coming at you. It's not quite connecting.
Does it happen to everyone? Does everyone experience this at some point in their life?
So it's estimated around 70% or more people
Mm-hmm.
experience this at some point in
Really?
their lives.
Okay.
Yep. And probably 25 to 30% more frequently than just a one off basis. It's more of a reoccurring thing. And the irony of it is, it tends to be your overachievers. It tends to be those that are actually completely worthy of all the awards and all their recognition and their accolades and things like that. Um, it's it's just no matter what the outward validation is, that story that we keep telling ourselves is that we're not deserving, we're not good enough, we're not worthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but it's a big number. It's a big number.
And this is a general question and to ask. Are we finding any differences between men and women at all? Is there a difference for us, or does it matter at all?
So, one of the things I'm grateful for is that, kind of as I have conversations, people are willing to share and be vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
judgment free zone. So it's kind of come have the conversation. And so what I have seen is that it's more people there is a gender bias, although I would say I see it in both men and women. I think you do have a higher percentage of women do have imposter syndrome, and a lot of, there are studies and stuff that link the feeling back to stereotypes and biases, right? So, and these are long standing. Actually, as I was preparing for this, I found myself rereading a research paper that I had read many, many years ago. It was actually the first time that imposter syndrome was documented. And it was in 1978. And I was reading it and I was just like, oh my goodness, like tweak a couple things and this probably could have been written yesterday, right? And that one in particular did focus on women as they were going into kind of professions and things like that, and just what their feelings were. And, it was amazing. But a lot of it came back to those stereotypes and those biases, right? So, and if you think about, we have come a long way, but I think there's still kind of those undertones here and there. But it's not based on ability, it's based on luck, right? So it's kind of that expectation that maybe you're not going to go be whatever that may be, right? And things like that. So those expectations maybe are out of alignment. So because you don't have those expectations of doing great things, when you do great things, somehow in your head you're translating it into it was luck, which is what leads to imposter syndrome.
How do we make it better? I just find it hard. I mean, and I say this and I go through this myself. It's kind of, I guess in some way it's true, because then it's like, what's your metric? What's your measurement? Are you measuring yourself against another person? And do you have to do that all the time? Or are you going based on someone else's opinion of you, based on someone else's idea of what it is that you're supposed to be doing? And if any of that could be the case, how do we fix it? How do we resolve? Where do we start to make it better, or to work with it? I don't want to say let's hold hands with it and frolic, but how do we make it so that it works to our advantage? How do we have the awareness of it? What do we do?
So I would actually say hold hands and frolic with it.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. In terms of, see it as it's an indicator.
Okay.
It's telling you something, right? But also appreciate kind of the impact that it's had. It's trying to protect you in some way, shape, or form, right? So I look at, coaches have coaches, right? So I met with mine last week in preparation, and it was funny because we both got a laugh because I said, okay, I need to help me work through my imposter syndrome around doing a talk about imposter syndrome. And, we had a laugh about it, right? But it was because we could take the energy out of it. I was able to recognize what I was feeling. I was questioning myself. It was self-doubt and things like that. But as we were talking and she was asking me questions, I realized that because I was, worried and things like that, what it was is I cared. I cared that I had the potential to be able to, help people understand it and help people find ways to not have to feel this anymore, which then made me do additional research and made me do these additional things. So I think I went, okay, I ring fenced that emotion, right? So I was able to kind of separate it from myself. It hit for a split second. I knew exactly what it was. I went, okay, I see you. But you know what? I'm going to use this for good. I'm going to use this to recognize that I really care about this topic. I really care about having the conversation with you. And I'm going to use it in order to show up better when I come here. So I think there is a positive piece of it that you can use it to your advantage, right? I do feel like you have to make small incremental steps. And one of those starts with really focusing on the positive, right? Because we tend to, confirmation bias. Most people have probably heard this, is that, as you operate in the world, you're looking for pieces of information that actually validate things that you already think or what you already believe, right? So if you think about somebody walking through the world who feels like they're not worthy or they're not good enough or things like that, anything, any little sliver that they could grab hold of that could actually validate that is a truth, that is true, they're going to look for that. They're going to see it and they're going to gravitate toward it. But what I would say is that if you are able to look objectively across, there are probably 100 times the indicators that go counter to that.
Okay, so now you kind of touch on something, self-awareness. Um, I don't want to say a lot of us do not have self-awareness. I want to say a lot of us, even if we have self-awareness, we, for whatever reasons, don't always address things. Even if maybe we'll say, oh, I noticed it, and then maybe get distracted by something else or go do something else, or I'll deal with it later, or it's just not that important. So what I'm hearing from you is self-awareness is key here in order to recognize it, point it out. I think self-awareness is necessary in a lot of different instances, especially when you're also talking about awareness, but also a little self-healing, if I'm hearing it the right way too. So, I mean, for those who choose not to be self-aware or pass it over, how does one become more self-aware if that's what they want to do? How do they recognize it? I mean, because it's not like the signs aren't there, but again, it's easy to get distracted by other things. How can one work on their self-awareness of these things or types of things?
So I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of they move on to the next thing.
Right.
They don't spend the time thinking about it, right? So I do feel like reflection is key. Taking time, and it doesn't have to be long. So it just, but sitting back and thinking about it is important, right? So when something gives you an emotion of some kind, that's kind of one of those, it's kind of like, okay, I got that, right? And it kind of stops you. Carve out some time just to think about the why behind it. Like, what was it? What was the sequence of events that led up to it? Like, why are you feeling that? And how could you make that better? Right. And kind of think through that. So, a lot of people do that through journaling. For me, journaling, because I am a data geek, right? Like, I'm very analytical, I'm very logic based. So, journaling for me felt to feelings, felt to emotion, right? That's not to say it's bad. Like, I think it's phenomenal. I just personally could never quite connect with it. However, what I do is I have a Katie optimization and troubleshooting guide.
Okay.
Okay. So it's mouthful, but ultimately what it is it's just what's working and what's not. And so I go about it very systematically. So again, what's authentic to me, I go through step by step, and I've been doing it for years, just kind of in my head. And I more recently started actually writing it down. But it's that on a weekly basis, take 10 minutes. I mean, who doesn't have 10 minutes on a weekly basis, right? Just go, okay, looking back over the week, what worked? Okay, why? Got it. What didn't work? Why? What can I do differently? And then iterate on that over time, right? Because, and I think that reflection will build self-awareness. And I think it'll also make you recognize how many different types of moments there are through the course of your life that you can actually anchor and think about more deeply if you choose to.
Wow. So we have a couple more questions I think we should touch on. I want to jump into your childhood just a little bit. Because I don't want them to miss anything that's valuable and important. All right, so tell us about that, because you had told me a story, so I'm asking you to retell that story for them, if you would.
Absolutely. So this one for me is actually where I was able to identify the source of my imposter syndrome.
Okay.
So for me, I am a big why person.
Okay.
So if I can get to the why, typically I can find a solution off of the why. That's just kind of how my brain works. And so I'll keep kind of poking on something. So, I had that feeling of, kind of, I didn't deserve whatever that may be, the promotion, the award, things that I got and stuff like that. And so I was kind of like, all right, I know I'm feeling this, but why am I feeling it? What is that? Right. And what I did was I tracked it back to, so I have a learning disability with languages, and I even hesitate to use the word disability because it became my superpower. And so, but early on, for the first 3-4 years of my school, I was in the resource room, kind of going through very systematic teachings on how to read, watching my letters and things like that. And I can remember even in first grade when they had the books lined up, they had the levels of the books, right? And I remember I always had to go to the level 1, the most basic, when everybody else in the class was more in level 5s and level 6s. And I think going back to that, I think I realized that at that point I internalized that I wasn't smart enough. And so that I'm not smart enough is what has carried throughout my life, right? Now, where the imposter syndrome kind of kicks in is that I then had, starting in fourth grade, basically got near perfect grades for the rest of my academic career. So I now have 3 or 4 years being countered by years and years and years of kind of positive things that are actually saying the opposite. It is saying that I am smart enough and that I've overcome these challenges and I've figured out kind of how to work with my brain and stuff like that. Yet that fear of still not being smart enough, or that core belief that I'm still not smart enough, kind of continues to bubble up.
Right.
So for me, I was able to actually identify it and figure out what that root was. And that gave me my power back, right? Because I knew why I was feeling what I was feeling. There wasn't anything wrong with me. There was just a moment in time during those formative years where I felt something and it was very real. It was very much on me. It was internal to me, but that was kind of the genesis of mine.
I think everyone probably has one of those stories. A lot of people do. I won't say everyone. I have the same story. I'm not going to delve into it, but it feels like a mirror. When I listen to you, it feels like there's a bit of a reflection here. And I think about my own childhood and some of the struggles that I had myself and where I am today. And I have to have a constant reminder, like, hey, you're good enough. That whole, I remember we learned in school, ILAC, I am lovable and capable, right? And I hear that in my head every once in a while to remind myself, the nuns, the parochial education and all that being said. But I hear you, I understand, and I feel it at the same time. But you also recommended something that I thought was a nugget. Speaking of the jar, I want you to talk about the jar.
Okay. So the jar is, and you can do it with a jar, or you can also do it with stickers. I like stickers.
Okay.
Mom was a preschool teacher, so kind of stickers are kind of a thing in my house.
Okay.
But the jar is great too. And what it is it's basically a way to really force yourself to focus on the positives.
Okay.
Right. So, it was interesting. So I was doing a talk, and somebody had asked me just during the Q&A section, have I always been this confident? And I started laughing. I was like, oh my goodness, no. And I said, I don't wake up thinking I'm awesome possum. I was like, I wake up and be like, okay. And I was like, but I think what made me different was that when somebody said I was good at something, I was willing to hear them. I didn't dismiss them. And so what I try to do is I did that kind of internally and kind of created a little grid and kind of banked those kind of positive, or those you did great with this, or you're great at that, or whatever it is. I banked them on the positive side. And what I did was I tried to get that to be a bigger and bigger ball, so that it basically, I could see, and again, for me, it was just in my head, how much those outweighed any time that somebody even challenged that I was smart enough, or, which on a relative, like, they're not even comparable. So the jar is, what you can do is you can take 2 different color stones.
Okay.
And you just have them, and it's basically a way to force the positives and the negatives of capturing them.
Okay.
And being able to visually see. Sometimes there's also, you can do this for habits if you're trying to move a habit forward, or you're trying to make progress with something, is you basically take a stone and you put it in the jar for each time something happens. So on a weekly basis, each day, kind of go home and be like, how many positive things did I hear about myself? Put those in the jar. And so let's say use pink ones for the positive, right? So take your 3 pink, 3 people said 3 positive things. You take your 3 pink rocks and you put them in the jar.
Okay.
And you go, did anybody say I was bad at something? Did anybody? And I mean, say, not your perception that you read somebody as they were, but they actually said it. If they did, put that color in there.
Okay.
I am almost willing to guarantee by the end of the week, that jar will have a lot more pink stones than it will the other color.
Okay.
Because the reality is that we do have a lot more positivity around us than sometimes we're even aware of. It's just that, again, that confirmation bias, we are so hyper-focused on validating that negative feeling about ourselves that we tend to hyper-focus on those. And so this allows you to redirect it and really force yourself to focus on those positives.
I think we're running out of time, but I want to ask, what's your last bit of advice? What would you recommend?
So I would say for yourself, really try to listen for those positives.
Okay.
Don't dismiss them.
Okay.
You can manufacture confidence using those,
Right.
right? And I do want to clarify, this isn't external validation that you're seeking.
Right.
This is more just more weighing the negatives that you're taking in against the positives. That's all it is. Is it just giving yourself a fighting chance to see yourself in a different way? And so I would say, make sure that you really are hyper focused on the positive, because I think what you'll find is that will create the momentum piece. And then I would also say, be open to sharing the positives. So
Okay.
knowing that 70% of people experience imposter syndrome, give them the positive feedback. When you hear that person speak and you're like, oh my goodness, that was amazing. I took this away, or I took that away, or they said something in a meeting, or you watched a parent do something that was a beautiful experience with their child, whatever it is, say it and
Mm-hmm.
be specific. Because if you're specific, that will really stick. Not just, oh, you're great, but like give them something tangible that they can hold on to, because hopefully that will create kind of that experience within them that they can then carry and tap into anytime they question themselves.
And I remember one thing you did say to me is, accept the compliment,
Mm-hmm.
take it, and walk away with it. And I think that was like a beautiful message, because it can get hard to accept compliments, and that seems like something kind of silly to say in a sense, but it's not. It's profound in a way. Accept the compliment and say thank you
Mm-hmm.
and leave it. Um, Katie, it has been a pleasure having you here with us today. Thank you so very much. Yeah, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be here. And everyone, I think that's it for us today. It's been our pleasure being here with you today. And again, we're here to give you information to help you um, do what you want to do in the way that you want to do it. So I'm Laura. This is Katie. This is Bear Fitness. And we're going to see you next time. All right.
Thank
Bye.
you.